Hello, Terry. I was thinking of you. I'd like you to come visit, and I'll visit you. I'm picturing you through the glass, through the brightness. I'm going to turn this down. How are you? I'm sure you're Baruch Hashem. Hi, Lisa. It's so nice. I always get excited. I just want you to know I'm seeing people, and I make big fires in my fire pit. So I love having guests around my fire pit. Unless I'm being politically incorrect. Am I? I don't think so. We're very careful here. And, wow, so nice, really. Actually, I'm going to include you in my story tonight. But it's going to be at the end of it's going to be the second hour, Terry. I'm going to, in connection with the Alter Rebbe, you're going to have to either stay tuned or I'll give it over to you in person later if you don't. Okay, but I won't say your name, but you're going to be part of my example because it's one of my favorite stories connected to Yotes Kislev. Hi, Fran. How you doing? So nice that you're here. We'll just wait another minute and then we'll start. There's a lot to talk about tonight. Hi, Sherry. Welcome. And I like purple hearts. And purple hearts, red hearts. I like any kind of hearts. Actually, tonight we're going to talk about the heart also. So I really miss everybody. And really wish everybody just that we're together again soon. And really good things should be happening for everybody. It's that time of year. Hanukkah's coming up. And Aiden Tova. Wow, and Adrian. My redheaded friend from Portland is on, everybody. One of the wonderful, wonderful people that I met in Ascent. And, I was somewhere last week, actually, and a person I know very well in LA here, she told me that we met in Ascent originally, years and years ago. And, of course, I didn't remember, but I'm so happy that that's where I met her. Barbara, look at this. When we're on Facebook, you show up on time. That's excellent. You get a free Shabbos dinner whenever you want, sometime in the future. Okay, I'm going to start. It's enough hellos. It's so hard to resist. I just want to give everybody who comes on time a big blessing. And of course, and everybody else who will come later will also get a blessing. But we should just all have a blessing to really come through this with smiles on our faces and with, open hearts to each other and to bless each other. And I see few people are on from some of my classes. So I just want to say Elaine had Baruch Hashem, she's doing great. She had a knee surgery, and we want to wish her really a complete healing. And so did my friend Hinda Yehudis Bas Kaylee. They had the same surgery. So, hi, Phyllis. So I told them that they should be praying for each other, that they had it the same day, the same time, the same type. It's not a usual, not everybody's having their knees replaced the same day and the same time. And they're both doing really well. So praying for each other is always positive. I remember I had a very, very close friend who didn't have children. And I went to Israel 3 different times, and I prayed for her 3 different times that she should have a child. And each time I got pregnant. So finally, after the 3rd one, I said to her, you know what? You're going to have to pray for yourself because this is, I'm being overloaded here. So it does work to pray for other people, and it warms your heart also. So I want to dedicate tonight, a few people asked me to include their loved ones in tonight's learning. So I want to dedicate it. There are two yortzites. One is Bela Bas Chaim, and the other is Yosef ben Yaakov, that their souls should just have the highest of elevations, and they should storm the gates of Mashiach and ask him to come down and release us all from whatever problems and troubles and being locked up and locked in and locked down and whatever, and that we really should be in that time of complete holiness and godliness that can come into the world and that will come into the world. And I see we have Jerusalem well represented right now, so it's a good time to start. And I also, in addition to Hinda and Elaine, I want to ask everybody to daven for complete healing. First of all, for whoever you know, and for those far and wide that you don't know. And in particular, Chaya Sivia Bas Miriam, Ephraim Le ben Rivka Leah, Barak ben Leah, and everyone who needs a healing. So I want to start tonight with a story. Last week we talked about the Mittler Rebbe. So the Mittler Rebbe was the second Lubavitch Rebbe. He was the son of the Alter Rebbe, who was the first Rebbe, and hi Sarah, and who we're going to speak about later tonight. But the Mittler Rebbe was named for the Maggid of Mesrich, who we're also going to talk about tonight. But the Mittler Rebbe's name was Dov Ber, and I also want to mention my son Beryl, whose birthday, his English birthday is today, and he's also named Dov Ber, and he was also named for the Maggid of Mesrich, whose yortzeit is going to be coming up on this Shabbos. So we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Hi, Patrice. So this is the story about the Mittler Rebbe. We also, last week when we were learning, we talked about how the Mittler Rebbe had been imprisoned and his birthday and his yortzeit were on the same day. I'm just reminding you of who he was. And he was the head of Chabad. He was a Rebbe for 15 years. And it says one of the features, he was very royal, and one of the features of his court was that he gathered something called capella, which was a court orchestra that sang and played music on special occasions. Very, very talented young musicians and singers. And he also had a group of Chassidim followers who were accomplished horse riders, and he gave them the nickname Cossacks. So the musically talented Chassidim means a follower of a Rebbe. The musically talented ones were called Capella, and the strong and horse committed ones were called Cossacks. So at special times, the Rebbe would look out the window of his home, and he would signal to bring the Capella and to bring the Cossacks. And the Capella would play their music and sing, and the Cossacks would ride their horses in a celebratory dance while the Capella was singing. And it came to be that the Mittler Rebbe had a son, Rebbe Nachum, and he was part of the Cossacks. He was a strong young man. And once in the middle of the week with no special occasion, usually he only called them when there was a special occasion, but in the middle of the week with no special occasion, he called the Capella and the Cossacks to come and play music and sing and the horses to dance. And in the midst of this celebration, the Mittler Rebbe's son, Reb Nachum, fell from his horse, and they ran to report to the Rebbe that his son was gravely injured, and he did not react. He instructed them to keep on with the music and with the horses as if nothing had happened. And a little while passed. The Chassidim could not understand. It seemed so strange. Here his son was gravely injured. But a little time passed, and then they came to the Rebbe and they said, oh, he only has a broken leg, that he's okay, that he wasn't in danger, only his leg had been broken. And the Rebbe said it would be completely healed, and it was down the line. And later, at a certain time, the Hasidim asked the Rebbe what had happened. Like, why did he call the Kapala and the Cossacks in the middle of the week with no special occasion that was known? Why did he call on them? And even less, why didn't he react when his son fell and got hurt? Why wasn't he reacting? And the Rebbe explained that morning when he woke up, he sensed that there was something very serious, of serious prosecution against his son. And he says the way of sweetening the severe judgment against his son was to use joy. We know that there's a saying that joy has the ability to push away darkness. So here, there was a severe decree that he saw against his son. And instead of reacting, he just called in all his forces to increase in joy. So the main thing that we can learn from this story is the power of joy to sweeten severe judgments and to nullify bitter decrees. That this is what we have to do. We have to find the way to be in joy, because joy is a choice. Joy is a decision. And we know that it says in Tanya that a person can have joy in one part of their heart and weeping in the other. So that if, God forbid, there's a time for weeping, one can also find that place in their heart for joy. And that joy has the ability, just like a tiny bit of light can dispel darkness, that joy also has the ability to dispel darkness. And he instructed at that time of darkness for his son, the Hasidim, to increase in joy, and he effected a complete salvation. And it says that in the Mittler Rebbe's court, the Rebbe's kind of Hasidim were always called a court, the greatest expression of joy was specifically with this legion of what he called the Cossacks, the horse riders. And why? Because they displayed harsh judgment. They were strong. They were emulating something that was involved with judgment. But when you put the Cossacks together with the Kapella, with those who sang and brought music, it transformed the Cossacks' display of might and severity into a celebration of victory. And the previous Rebbe explained that the joy of victory is the greatest of all joys. So I just wanted to share that because I forgot to share it last week. And since the Mittler Rebbe is named Dov Ber for the Maggid of Mezrich, whose yahrzeit is also this coming Shabbos, I wanted to include it. And he is buried in the Ukraine in a city called Nezhin. And later on in the evening, when we talk about the Alter Rebbe, who's instrumental in this Yom Tov, the holiday that's coming up called the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, I will tell you about visiting the grave of the Mittler Rebbe in Nezhin in the Ukraine. So I want to begin the Parsha, okay? So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to study a little bit about the Parsha, and then we're going to have a little Farbrengen. I have my Farbrengen equipment right here. Everybody should get their Farbrengen equipment so they can say L'chaim, because we're going to talk about Yud Tes Kislev, which is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. But first, we're going to talk about the Parsha. So the Parsha opens up. So everybody remembers the story. I'm just going to go briefly. One second. Where is my? Here it is. I'm just going to go briefly over the Parsha. For anybody who might not know, I'm going to just summarize it very quickly. Hi, Renee. Wow, I see a long-time friend. So nice. Wow. Okay, so it says here that, remember we talked about Yaakov last week and his brother Yaakov. So now it says that he learns that his brother Esav, he finishes working for Lavan. He worked for him for 7 years for Rachel, but he got Leah. Then he worked for him for 7 years again. So he worked 14 years for him for his 2 wives. And then he worked another 6 years. So he worked for him 20 years altogether. And then he left with great wealth. He left with cattle, and he left with ox and donkeys and servants and wives and children. So he learns that his brother, who's bearing him a grudge because he had, in his brother's eyes, he has his birthright. He learns that his brother Esav is on the way to confront him with a big entourage. And in this week's Parsha, his daughter Dinah is abducted and violated. His wife Rachel dies in childbirth. So there's a lot of parts of this Torah reading, and I want to encourage everybody to read it on their own, because we're only, like we do in the class, we take one small part and we go into it with a lot of depth and understanding. So it says that his father Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Esav's father Yitzhak wanted to bless Esav with everything, and he was hoping it would change him and reform him, but he was not interested. And that's why he did sell his birthright to his brother Yaakov, even though Yaakov was really the firstborn, in literally, because he was the first conceived. And he inadvertently gave the blessings that he was going to give to Esav, he gave them to Yaakov. And let me just see what else, just to quickly summarize for anyone who is not familiar. And from year to year, I have to admit, don't feel bad if you're not familiar, because from year to year, I have to also review what is in the weekly Parsha. And it says that Yaakov understood that in order to bring order to the world, in order for the world to fulfill its destiny, there had to eventually be peace with Esav, that his strength and Esav's strength would need to be combined. And that's why he was going towards him. He was going to see if he can reconcile peace. And it says he wanted him to join forces with him. He didn't come to battle him. He wanted to join. But when he became clear that that was not possible, he had to go in another direction. And it says, and the name of the Parsha, which is Vayishlach, and he sent, refers to how Yaakov sent emissaries to Esav in order to ask him to join forces. So we're going to go into some of that, a small amount of that. Okay, so we're going to start off with, we're going to do 3 different sections, 3 different teachings about this Parsha. The first is going to be from different talks from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So the Parsha opens up, and it talks about how Yaakov sent angels to dispatched angels as messengers ahead of him to meet with his brother Esav. And it says that he did not send human messengers because he didn't know what the reception would be. And it's like if you asked your best friend or even an acquaintance to do something for you and you thought their life might be in danger, you wouldn't send them. So he didn't know, and so he sent the angels. And it's interesting because it says that he sent these angels, and just to kind of skip ahead to what I was going to be talking about later, but I'm going to include it now, the Maggid of Mezrich, whose name was Dov Ber, it's his yurtzeit on Yurtes Kislev also. I was also to his grave in Annapolis. He's buried in Annapolis in the Ukraine. And the last Shabbos of his life was this Parsha, was Parsha Vayishlach. And he was attending, it was a Friday night, and it was the Shalom Zachar, which is the welcoming of a new baby boy, of the Alter Rebbe's second son, whose name was Chaim Avraham. And at this welcoming ceremony for this baby, he spoke about Yaakov sending messengers, sending angels to Esav. And it says that in the physical sense, he actually did send angels to Esav, but the spiritual aspect of the angels stayed by Yaakov. So what does that mean? Like, how can you separate it? When we have a body and a soul, we can't separate our body and our soul. They're one together. And it seemed to be with angels in this sense they are. So it says that he in these last days of his life, he saw divine energy, and he's asking why did he send the angels? And the answer is because he couldn't send human messengers, not knowing what their reception would be. But he wanted to inspire Esav. He wanted to be able to bring out the pure side of him. And he thought that the angels could accomplish that, but he only sent the external of the angel. The ruchnius, the soul level, stayed by Yaakov. So it says, but can you separate the body from the soul, even in angels? So it says angels, we're speaking of them of having bodies. And in this form, when they went to do a good deed, when they went to serve a purpose, they did have. But it says that there was an inner transcendent energy that represents their soul, and that doesn't separate. So what does it mean? The Maggid of Mizrich is asking this question. And he says they were sent in a way that they didn't lose themselves in Esav, meaning that they never left Yaakov's domain. So when he sent them, there was not a possibility of them being absorbed in the energy of Esav, because they knew they were on a mission, and their mission was to purify Esav. That was why he sent these angels out to them. And it says that the ruchnius, the spirituality, remained by Yaakov, not with Yaakov, meaning that even when the angels were with Esav, the spiritual aspect of it was connected to the essence of Yaakov. That they never lost that. They were only there to try to influence Esav, to try to purify Esav. So it says, and they didn't get affected by Esav, and that was why it's talking about how mamish, their physicality, if you can call angels having physicality, that their physicality went to Esav. Their physicality went to inspire him, to attract him, but their essence stayed with Yaakov. They were not transformed. They were not absorbed in Esav. And it says this is what the Maggid spoke about on the last Shabbos of his life. And so we'll go into it a little later on when we're going to talk more about the Maggid. So here the commentary is talking about it. It's a talk by the Rebbe saying Yaakov dispatched angels. And what is the lesson for us? Because everything we learn in Torah, we need to bring back to us. There must be a message for us in this. And most of us don't have angels at our disposal. So we say that angels are non-corporeal beings, and that they can bring in different phenomena, and such as human intelligence and human emotions. So it says that Yaakov sent these non-corporeal beings, these angels, to assess where Esav was. And it says what we learn from that is that when we're faced with new experiences, that we should dispatch the things that are not really of our essence, but what is not of our essence are our intellect and our emotions. And that we should assess with our intellect and our emotions whatever comes before us, whatever opportunity, whatever circumstance is there. Because what we want to know is, are we going to be able to use this circumstance for holiness, or will we harm ourselves by spiritually engaging with whatever is presented to us? And just because we're given a certain opportunity does not mean that we're supposed to take that opportunity. It could be that God wants us to be involved in it, and it could be that God doesn't, and we have to have the discernment. We have to have that way to look, to see what its purpose is and how it would affect us. And it might be an opportunity for us to resist a certain temptation, and by resisting that temptation to sanctify ourselves in that way. So we have to be able to have discernment and assess every new situation. And also, sometimes our partiality, like that was why the angels that went to Esav were physically by him, but their essence, their spirituality was by Yaakov, because that we don't want just being in the presence of something to distort our conclusion. So we have to detach emotionally from what the process is, from what's going on, and that we only should dispatch our external intellect and emotions to discern it. And this is the attitude that we need to have towards the material world. And that's what Esav represents. Esav represents the materiality of the world, that we want to be so attuned to our souls that our souls will be able to discern and be able to transcend materiality. And the name of this Parsha, Vayishlach, it says he dispatched, he sent, conveys an idea that when we deal with Esav, which Esav represents divine concealment. Everything, many things in this Torah reading is talking about concealment, about godly concealment. And it says that we have to remove ourselves from that attraction to Esav, from that attraction to this realm of divine concealment. We have to release those sparks that are being concealed. And it says that only our messengers should deal with Esav. That means those external emotions and intellect should deal with Esav, that because we need to be detached in order to transform. So we want to transform our attraction to materiality or to things that don't serve godliness. And in order to be able to transform them, there has to be a distance. We can't be absorbed in them. So he says, even though I have been, this is Yaakov, and we're going to go into this in depth, even though I have been sojourning, meaning living with Lavan, all these years, I have continued to faithfully observe the Torah's commandments. So also this word for live, sojourned, also means ger, a stranger, a foreigner. So it says that Jacob was alluding to the fact that the materialistic realm that he lived in, with that Lavan I adored and Lavan served, was foreign and secondary to him. That was not his interest. His home and priority was Torah and all the commandments. And because he had this awareness to distance himself from the materiality of Lavan, he was able to fulfill the Torah's precepts in an environment that was totally hostile to holiness. It's such an important point, and it's such an important lesson in a world that really fights against holiness, that actually fights against holiness. I was listening to a class tonight from a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. We share many things in common. Bracha Meshanina does a class, and she talked about how her husband had seen an article talking about the new way to enliven the environment by using physical bodies as fertilizer. You'll save on the environment, and it'll be such an honoring of the person. This is so blatantly opposed to godliness and holiness, such a disregard of the holiness of humanity in a real sense. So it says that not only was Yaakov able to resist this hostile atmosphere and live according to Torah, but he was also able to put holiness in this hostile environment. So when Yaakov meets up with Esav, his first message to him was about his Torah observance. So it teaches us a lesson about how we present ourselves to the non-Jewish world. And I think this is, one of the things we learned from the Alter Rebbe is we need to live with the times and to live with the Torah portion of the week. So it means, in our day, in our year, in 2020, where we're living here, I'm in Los Angeles. Sarah Lydia is in Jerusalem, and there are other people in other places. I have a friend from India who comes on. So it says that the first thing we have to do in presenting ourselves to the non-Jewish world is that we don't want to highlight our commonality. We don't want to highlight what we have in common by downplaying our Jewishness and our Jewish practice. It says that from Yaakov we learn that we should not be ashamed of our Torah observance, and we should highlight it. And we should have pride in our godly mission that we're enhancing the world by doing it. And I remember I have a wonderful friend, Linda, who had a very big work position in one of the fields of Hollywood. And she was going on a big business luncheon one day. And she said to me afterwards, I had a decision to make because we were sitting at the table and everybody was ordering food. And I went on the business luncheon and I had an option. I only ordered, a piece of fruit, like a cut fresh fruit. And she said that I could have said I was vegetarian because everybody said, oh, you're only eating that? How come you're not ordering anything? She said, I could have said that. And she said, it took a lot of courage, but I didn't say that. I said, I keep kosher. So that is to not be afraid of the environment and really to spread godliness in it. So it goes on to say, I've been sojourning with Lavan, and I have delayed my return until now. So it says that Yitzhak wanted to bless Esav because he recognized his great potential and that he had lofty spiritual roots. He must have if he came from the parents that he came from. And Rivka realized that Esav's potential could only be revealed by his brother Yaakov. And she told Yaakov to receive the blessing and then to use that blessing to refine and elevate Esav. Now Yaakov is going to meet Esav. And it took him a long time to get around to doing that. It took him a long time, many, many years. And he had to explain why he didn't come right away to help elevate him, why it took him so many years with Lavan, instead of coming and doing the job that he was entrusted with, which was refining Esav. And he explained that his sojourn with Lavan had to precede his time with Esav for two reasons. One related to Lavan himself, and the second to his manifestation in the world. So we see that Lavan alludes to supernal whiteness. The word Lavan means white, and reflecting God's essence. And it says that when Yaakov lived with Lavan all those years and kept all the commandments of the Torah, that he had access to Lavan's source and holiness because they were from the same family. There was a connection. There was a connection to holiness, even for Lavan. And he had an energy that transcended a natural order. And for 20 years, Yaakov pulled on these transcendent energies. And how did it end? It culminated with Lavan kissing Yaakov's children goodbye when they left, which meant that Yaakov and his family absorbed into themselves this energy of the origin of Lavan. And then because of that, it gave him the capacity to elevate Esav. And then he went immediately to do it. And it says that Esav was a greater evil than Lavan. And Yaakov began with the lesser evil. He kind of practiced on refining the lesser evil, and then he had to go to an even lower place to refine Esav. These things are all on very multi-diverse levels. And then he comes and he says, I have acquired cattle and flocks. So it says spiritually, cattle and flocks of sheep represent two different holy attributes that Yaakov possessed. Cattle represents strength, even brazenness, and sheep represent humility and selflessness. And Yaakov's primary spiritual stock was humility and selflessness. And when he needed to use strength, he did use his strength. And to ensure that his strength would not lead to egotistical brashness and brutishness, in a sense, Yaakov purchased his cattle with sheep, meaning his strength came from his selflessness, and he was strong only for the sake of fulfilling his mission. When he needed to, only for his mission, he exerted it. So it goes on to say, I have acquired cattle. So it says that oxen are used to plow fields, and Yaakov was a shepherd. He wasn't a cattle herder, and he was not a landowner. He didn't own this land he was working, and he didn't become a landowner for two reasons. Because we know through Abel that the earth was cursed, and also Yaakov's mother, Rivka, told him to only sojourn with Lavan, only to live with Lavan for a short while until the wrath of his brother would dissipate. And so he was waiting for any moment to hear from his mother that it was safe to return home. So he never purchased land, and he never became a landowner, because when you have land, you need to work it for many years before it's productive. And therefore, he owned only oxen with which he plowed the small plot of land that he did own in order to grow his own food. But it says that Esav was a landowner, and to impress him, Yaakov spoke his language, and he spoke about oxen. He says, I have acquired cattle for an ox and donkeys donkeys. And according to the Midrash, Yaakov was alluding to his sons that he had in the future, Yosef and Yisachar, who were referred to metaphorically as ox and donkey. And we're going to go into this in another piece of Torah. And it says, again, the Maggid of Mizrich, Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mizrich, explained that our inner Esav, which means our evil inclination, attempts to corrupt us in two ways. One is through the heat of desire for material pleasures, and the other is coldness or apathy towards goodness. And how do we counteract that? We have passion for holiness and apathy for materialism. And this is represented by Yosef as the ox and Yisachar as the donkey. And it goes on to say, and this is I'm going to tell you the source in a minute. It comes from the prophet Obadiah or Ovadia. It says, the house of Yosef will be a flame, and the house of Esav for stubble. And it says, in Yisachar there is a reward, and it's associated with holy apathy. And what is holy apathy? The Talmud says that there's a reward for apathy towards certain things and it will prevent you from sinning, meaning things that you shouldn't be concerned with, and that prevents one from sinning. And that the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, taught that the ox is associated with Gevurah, and it represents fiery love and intense love for God. The donkey alludes to coldness, because its nature is to feel cold even in the summer. And it says this coldness is associated with the tribe of Yisachar, which really epitomized Torah knowledge and wisdom, because what did that Torah knowledge and wisdom do? What was their apathy towards for material pleasures? So they had it in the right direction. And just to conclude this piece, this is very interesting. So we know that he heard that when Yaakov was going towards Esav, he heard that he was heading towards him, and he had 400 armed men with him. So it says he was not afraid. And I think we learned about this a few weeks ago. Yes, when we were talking about Abraham buying the land to build for the burial plot for his wife Sarah. It says that he was not afraid because he thought these 400 men were embodiments of the 400 worlds of spiritual delight. Because spiritually, the 400 coins that Abraham gave to Ephron in payment for the cave of the Machpelah, we talked about this when we studied Parsha Vayishlach, corresponded to the 400 worlds of delight that the righteous will inherit in the world to come. Notice that I'm saying it like it's a fact, like, whoa, what does that mean? I'm not really sure. Okay, so it says that Avram invested these energies with these 400 coins. He invested these energies in Ephron in order to extract them later on, like sowing a field with a small number of seeds in order to reap abundant produce later on. And when they remained in this realm of Ephron, they had a negative manifestation. And Yaakov thought that the energy of these 400 coins had been returned, and that had a relationship to these 400 men of Esav. And he thought that the release of whatever the sparks and worlds were, they were released into these 400 men of Esav, and he thought it would be for the positive, but he was wrong. And it says that they had not yet returned to their level of holiness. It didn't happen. And it says that Yaakov decided to employ 3 strategies. One to prepare for battle, one to pray for God, and one to prepare a gift. It says he didn't want to do any of these 3, but he overcame not wanting to, and he prepared. It says for battle, although he was afraid of being killed in war, and more than that, having to kill others, he overcame his fear and he prepared for war. The next was prayer, that he was afraid he was not worthy of God's protection, and he reached out to God in any case, and he prayed for his help. And the third was gifts, and it says that he was angry that he had to take these measures and to prepare gifts to give to Esav, but he did so in any case. So it says that even though he didn't want to do any of this, he overcame it, and he had an ability to engage in different types of behavior simultaneously. It's like a great teacher that can teach multi-levels at the same time. So it says that he preparing for war was an act of aggression. So that's the quality of Gevurah. Preparing a gift was the act of kindness. So that's the quality of Chesed. And those 2 acts related to human beings. And his final act was towards God, was prayer. And that related to God. And that was Rachamim, mercy, and Tiferes, beauty. So he had all these qualities at once, simultaneously. And it says that, and how does this relate to us? Because again, everything has to come back to us. And it says that because he was able to protect his family from Esav, that it gives us strength to do the same thing in the exile that we're undergoing, that we can't always do what comes easy to us. I mean, man, most of us have been shown that lesson now, that we have had to draw on strengths that we didn't know we had. We have had to come to a different part of ourselves and on many different levels. And so it, just like Yaakov engaged in a multifaceted approach, he had chesed, gevurah, and mercy, loving kindness, strength, and restraint, and mercy all simultaneously together. that we have to use all of these abilities that we have within us to protect our children from the spiritual, meaning ourselves also. We're always as children from the spiritual dangers that that we're in exile. And what is one of the most, what is one of the strongest spiritual dangers is sadness and depression. And we have to find a way during this time, in any way that we can, to not only lift ourselves out, but one of the qualities that the Alter Rebbe taught, and in a few minutes we're going to talk about the holiday of the Alter Rebbe, but one of those qualities was love of a fellow Jew, Ahavas Israel, and to really be able to reach out and to lift other people up, and to share whatever the burden is, and to share, how we're going to move forward and how we're going to care for each other and care for those that can't care for themselves. And there's many, many people. I'll just share something very personal that happened today. I have a grandson who broke something. I think it's an ankle. I don't know if it's broken, but I think it is, because he heard the snap and they went to the hospital. So when they were in the hospital after they fixed his leg, and my grandson is 12 years old. And the doctor said to the mother, I'd like to talk to him by himself. And it was afterwards, I said, did they want to know if you broke his leg? So she said to the doctor afterwards, listen, I have many more children at home. I'd probably harm myself before I'd harm one of my children. But they asked him certain questions. They asked him questions like, do your parents fight in front of you? Do they drink? Do they, a lot of very odd questions, And my daughter said that, that she could understand, and she feels very bad for the doctors, that there must be during this time so many people that are not handling the situation well, and really that are in grave difficulty, and families that are in difficulty, and we have to reach out. We have to find out who those families are, and we have to help them. We have to be there for each other. And so if anybody hears of anybody that's really in need, they can call me, I have a team of people, like my friend Naomi that wants to have a glass of wine with me right now. Yes, I'm having wine to share about my grandson who broke something, because it was my daughter-in-law's third trip in 6 weeks to the hospital. One kid had appendicitis, she's having everything that I never had. I think once, only with Shmuley, who I saw on here before, and Yosef also. But that's not bad for as many kids as I have. And my daughter Hindela always shows her broken finger that I thought she was just complaining about, that because it was Shabbos, we never took her to the doctor. I better have a l'chaim on that for Hindela. So, l'chaim. Okay. Let's continue so we can get to the Farbrengen part. Okay, so in this Parsha, we talk about that Yaakov comes to an angel, and he struggles with the angel, and it's the angel of Esav. And when he finishes, his name is changed. So it says, your name shall no longer be Yaakov, instead Yisrael, Israel shall be your name. So, and then it says, we know that Avram had his name changed. So it used to be Avram, and then it was changed to Avraham. And it said that your name shall no longer be called Avram, and he's never called that name again. It says your name shall no longer be Jacob, it should be Yisrael, but he is called that name again. So the question is, why does the name Jacob remain? So there is an Hasidic explanation. So it says Yaakov and Yisrael denote two levels, two stages of service in God. And both are necessary at different times in a person's life. Yisrael denotes a higher achievement, but it doesn't remove the necessity of being a Yaakov. And we'll go on to understand this. Yaakov implies that he acquired the blessings of Yitzhak by subtlety. He used cunning. His name also means to twist. So he took the blessings which had been intended, quote, unquote. We've gone into that in detail before. Tesav. Yisrael, on the other hand, is receiving the blessings through noble conduct in an open manner. So the blessings of that Isaac gave referred to the physical world and its benefits. And Rivka made great sacrifices in order to help Yaakov achieve these. He had to dress himself in the clothes of Nimrod. And what do we know about Nimrod? He turned the whole world to rebellion. And why did he have to dress in these clothes? Because he had to transform the elements of the physical world to holiness. Because within all physicality are buried sparks of holiness. And when we have a physical item, or when we find ourselves in a physical place that's a little odd, we say that there are sparks of holiness that are buried in that place that we have to release. And it says that we have the deeds of the fathers are signs for the children. That Yaakov's act is that we have to use cunning in terms of being smart enough to deal with our physical nature. It says that the cunning person does not reveal their intentions. That sometimes you look like you're going in the path of the opponent, but at the crucial moment, your involvement in the material world is very different. It looks like you're preoccupied with it. We eat, we drink, we do business, but we do it all for the sake of heaven. We devote everything we're doing for the sake of heaven. There is a purpose to it. You know, you eat that apple or you can eat that chocolate bar. I don't care which, really, unless I'm dictating to my children. But you eat it to get strength to do a mitzvah in the world, to do a good deed in the world. And we hope that's the direction that you're taking it in. But we're doing it for the sake of heaven. So sometimes you're wearing the clothes of Esav, but your purpose is to uncover the holy sparks, to release these holy sparks. And for that reason, Yaakov had to wear these garments, these physical garments of Nimrod, who caused rebellion in the world. Yisrael is that we obtain the blessings of the dew of the heaven and the fatness of the earth. It sounds very poetic. By our righteous conduct and our open conduct. And we don't need to conceal the fact that we're serving God. It can be open. The world has no hold on this person, on Yisrael. He doesn't hide the godliness that he's pursuing. So how can we see this? It says that when you eat during the week, that there is a tension between eating and the spiritual motivation. So we eat, and we're hopefully going to use that in service of good, in service of kindness, in service of godliness, to do good in the world, to smile at a person walking down the street. If you're hungry and grumpy, you're not going to be smiling at a person. If you need to eat to smile, then that's what you need to do to reveal that goodness in the world. But on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, just eating is a commandment. You're fulfilling a mitzvah on the Sabbath. Somebody told me that they're going to bring me a really good dessert for my outdoor Friday night dinner that she's coming to. And I said, I'm going to sacrifice myself because I read that it's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbat. I'm going to eat that yummy chocolate dessert. So it says that there's holiness in the physical, and when you're Yisrael, it's easily open holiness. It's not that you're revealing something that is concealed. So it says, your name shall no longer be Yaakov, but Yisrael, because you have contended with God and with men, and you have prevailed. So when it says you contended with God, it means with angels, and it generally connotes what we call the 70 heavenly princes, that divine, now this is Kabbalah, that divine emanations flow through that sustain all physical existence, and they conceal godliness. Godliness is concealed in the world. If we could see godliness in an open way, we see moments of godliness, we see acts of godliness, but not at every moment in front of us. And it says that, and when it says you have contended with God and with men refers to even a greater concealment. The concealment is such that people can criticize a Jew, they can mock the Jew for performing God's will. And this has happened. And the first paragraph of the entire code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, warns us not to be ashamed of those who ridicule. And we want to be openly serving God. We don't want to have to conceal our service of God. And it says this was the virtue of Yisrael, to have contended with angels and with men, and to have prevailed and revealed godliness in the world. And there are no longer barriers. And not only did Yaakov prevail in this battle with the angel of Esav, but the angel in the end blessed him. And it says in the book of Proverbs, he makes even his enemies be at peace with him. So Yaakov is also called my servant, and he's refining the animal's soul. And he doesn't sin, but he has this inclination to sin, and he has to overcome it. But Yisrael is the godly soul, and he doesn't have that inclination, and he always remains within the domain of the holy. So I'm just going to summarize this little piece. I'm going to skip a few things because there's a lot more that I want to get to. So it says that this level of Yaakov in serving God is that he fought this battle. And also it's interesting. It says that that this battle between Yaakov and Esav is a struggle in world history. And we know that when Yaakov comes in front of Esav, he bows down 7 times. And it represents his capacity to overcome the power of impurity. So each time he bowed, he knocked out another aspect of impurity until they were brothers again. And at that moment, they were able to kiss. And my light went out. And let's see why. Oh, well, okay. How do I look in purple light? I hope that's okay. I think I look good in purple light. My skin looks a little purple. Somehow my light must have burned out. Marcus in England, help, come fix it. Okay, so let me just see if my computer shut down, and then we'll see if we could fix it. 1 second. Hold on. Nope. Okay. Technical difficulties. Okay, we're going to ignore it. Okay, so we're coming to another piece, and we're going to go into this piece in detail. It says, we talked about this a moment before, I have sojourned with Lavan. So the word ani garti, the word garti has the numerical value of what we call the Torah mitzvahs, which are the 613 mitzvahs, because it has the same numerical value and the same letters. Thank you, everybody, for liking my purple look. So it says, though I have sojourned with the wicked Lavan, I have observed the 613 mitzvahs. So what relationship is there between I have observed these mitzvahs and the word and the plain meaning of just living with Lavan? So it says that again, what purpose was informing Esav of the fact, and what is the instruction relevant to us? So it says, I have sojourned with Lavan means that all aspects of Lavan, all the physical objects of oxen, donkeys, flocks, manservants, and maidservants were to Jacob, to Yaakov, no more than something alien and strange to him. They were not his true self. His true home was his soul and the aspects of Torah and mitzvahs. All material things were no more than strange to him. You know, so many people value themselves by their materiality, by what they own, by what they have. So it says that he built himself a house and he made booths for his cattle, meaning for himself, for his true being, the soul and its concerns, he built a house, a permanent dwelling place. But for his cattle, that means for all his material objects, which are something supplemental to him, something that he acquired, he made temporary dwellings for that. Because the soul, and especially the soul on high, before it descends to be in a body, has no need. I don't need my cattle. I don't need my car. I don't need my computer. That soul on high has no need for these things. And it says that we only acquire material objects when we descend to this world. You know, like I walk around my house and I see how many material objects I have just in this one room alone. This is just one room. And I remember that I used to travel around the world with one backpack with a few things in it. And then I don't know where this all came from. Somehow I have acquired a lot of material objects. But they're not me. They're not me. Maybe my purple vest from Kathmandu might be me, if you could see it. But other than that. So it's very hard, you know, like in our society, that's one of the things of being in like a kind of a quote hostile environment is that many people compare themselves according to what they have or what they've acquired and see their value. And really that is not a value, you know, it really isn't a value. But our society is, you know, if you just open any magazine and you see all the advertising, you know, and sometimes I go to different places and I see the thousands of different types of magazines that you can get on anything that's all about materiality. You know, it's very hard. You have to be very strong. You have to be very connected to understand that we're connected to God on high and that our soul is connected to God on high and that's where our true home is. And our true home is in that nest of godliness and not in what we have around us. So it says that there's a saying of the Maggid of Mezrich, Rabbi Dov Ber, and he says, at home it's different. At home one does need everything. But on a journey, one makes do. It doesn't matter. It's transitory on a journey. So I can have that one backpack with almost nothing in it when I was on a journey. But at home, I somehow need to have, a desk and a computer and a piano and a keyboard and an old telephone booth. It's really my son's. It's a sound booth and a lot of books. I have a lot of books. And it says that somebody once came to the Maggid and he looked around his house and he thought, and it was so broken down and he couldn't understand. And he said to the Maggid, you know, my home I have such beautiful furniture and I have beautiful things. So the Maggid said, well, what do you do when you're traveling? Do you have beautiful home when you're traveling? And no, he says, I make do with what there is. So the Maggid says, so that's what I'm doing. This is not my true home. I'm a traveler in this world, and I'm making do. So that we know that to gather around us, to gather those beautiful mitzvahs and the kindnesses, and to really extend ourselves, that's really the place where we put our true home. So by keeping the material concerns in this state of alienness, something outside ourselves, Yaakov assured that not only would they not interfere with the spiritual life, but also that a dimension of spirituality would be infused into matter, transforming matter into something spiritual and holy. And then it says, the passage concludes, and I have, meaning to me, there is oxen and donkeys, flocks and manservants and maidservants. And they came to be to me, meaning they're subordinated to my essence, to my spirit. So, I wanted to read, I'll read a footnote in a minute. So the Midrash is commenting, and he says the donkey, and we're going to focus now on the donkey, the chamor, refers to the royal Messiah, of whom it says he'll be lowly and riding upon a donkey. So it says the coming of the Mashiach, the coming of the Messiah, is contingent on the spiritual work of what we call birurim, meaning refinement, refining sparks of holiness in the world. And when every Jew purifies their body, their animal soul, and their part in the world, and uses all of that for holy purposes, this will bring about the manifestation of the future holiness with the level of Mashiach in the world. So it says when the body is used for a person's spiritual avoda, their spiritual work, the physical is subordinated to the spiritual, and then the body is purified. And the same applies to a person's animal soul, that the basic life force and faculties that relate to the physical life of a person is purified when you engage in holiness, when you engage in holy acts. And you purify your environment and you purify your piece of the world. Like if everybody could take the responsibility in their piece of the world, in their corner of the world, to purify that piece of the world, then we would be affecting this quality of the refinement of the sparks. And we could use them for holy purposes. And this is the concept of the coming of Mashiach. And I just have to break to say, hi, Hendela. Okay, now I can continue. If you're wondering why I'm all in purple, is because my light blew out. Okay, so it says, I have sojourn with Lavan, and I have oxen and donkeys. So again, Yaakov regarded the physicality as outside himself, and he used them for instruments for God's purposes. And he took this word stranger literally, meaning that he regarded all materiality as outside himself. It wasn't who he was. You know, again, I just, in this world, it's something that we all have to fight for. You know, we have to fight to not define ourselves by our possessions, by what we have. And I think, you know, it depends on your age, really, because as we grow and we see what's more in value, as we grow in years, we can remove ourselves a little more. It can become possible, but we want to be able to achieve it at every moment and at every age. And this is, it says, why he sent messengers to Esav to tell him that he himself, Yaakov, had completed all the refinement of all the sparks that he had to refine. And he was ready for Mashiach. He was ready for the Messiah to come. He did his part. And he also thought that Esav had done his part. That was his expectation. And that now redemption was possible. Now, that was the whole process of what we talked about before, of him bowing 7 times, and each time refining that impurity until he was able to really have one true hug and kiss for one moment. But it wasn't real. It didn't sustain itself. And the messengers came back, and they said, we came to your brother Esav, and there's a double reference of your brother and Esav, and it says, we came to your brother, to him who you said is your brother, but he behaves towards you like Esav the wicked. He is still harboring hatred. And as far as you're concerned, he is your brother. You are ready for redemption, but on his part, he is still prior to the refinement. That redemption is not yet possible. And I heard a tremendous teaching this year, and I don't know when I'm going to have time to give it over. Because it's very long and it's very detailed, and because we're going to talk about Yotes Kislev today also, but it talks about the battle between Yaakov and Esav as being the eternal struggle between good and evil in the world, and how it relates to the Shema Yisrael, and it goes through all the generations until today. But really, it is that struggle between good and evil, and we know that there is a possibility of Esav having these sparks refined, even though it says that it is known that Esav hates Yaakov. But still, in order for the redemption to happen, there has to be some way to reach this. There has to be some way. And we keep trying, I mean, it really, I hate to use my Weight Watcher example, but I like to use it a lot. Like if you are on Weight Watchers or whatever you're doing to control your weight and you fall off the wagon, the next morning you get back on and you just try again, and we can't give up. We can't say, oh, they're like that. Oh, Esav is like that. We have to continually, like Yaakov, he was always hoping. He was hoping for the refinement. He was hoping to be able, and that's why it says, the Maggid of Mezrich, in the piece that we learned in the beginning, says that when he sent out angels to Esav, that the physicality of the angel went, but the spirituality stayed by him. So that the angel would not be taken over by Esav, and that there would always be the potential that he could be refined. So it says the Torah and its instructions are everlasting and relevant to every Jew in every place. And it says that even though you do not see, or we do not see, redemption happening and refinement happening, we cannot give up hoping for it, praying for it, trying to achieve it. That we have to prepare ourselves for it. We have to do what it will take to get there. And it says, that's why it talked about him having flocks and manservants and handmaids, that everything that he had with him was for the redemption. And this preparation was by means of, I have sojourned with Lavan, the realization that I am a stranger on this earth. And that is a hard concept, because I kind of like the spa, and there are a lot of things I like on this earth. But can we like it without defining ourselves by it? Can we like it and use it in the service of godliness? I did figure out a way how to use the spa in the service of godliness. So when I fell in love with spas, due to my dear friend Patrice introducing me to mineral water, how did I find a way to turn it to godliness? I found a way to include many, many people in that, to bring many people into it, to do Torah retreats and lessons. And I wanted to also announce that I forgot. For anybody who wants to go to Florida, there's going to be a retreat January 18th to 21st with Shmona Zukernik in Florida. So if anybody wants to go to Florida to a retreat on the water, in the sunshine in the middle of the winter, that is a possibility. We can use everything in this world for godliness. We can go to beautiful places. We can have a beautiful home. We can invite guests in. We can have a beautiful car. We can drive people to treatments. We can offer rides to people. We can do good deeds with it. It doesn't mean abstaining, and it doesn't mean an ascetic life. And I just heard something yesterday. I heard it this morning. So in the mornings, I take a Torah class with Rabbi Brander. And since COVID started, we've gone through the book. We've done a lot of Torah, 15 minutes every morning, highly recommended. So we did Eov, and we did a lot. We did the book of Jonah, and we did a lot of stuff. We did maybe 6 different Torah books, and then we did the Yeshus Chayil in detail, and now we're doing Shir Shirim. And it's 15 minutes every morning. And he said something very interesting that I actually never put in words before. He was giving a commentary on a piece of Shir Shirim, and he said that for a Jew, that we relate to the spiritual world and we relate to the physical world. And for the non-Jews, they only relate to the spiritual world. And for me, it was really a clarification of the difference between a spirituality where you go take yourself outside this world, you sit on a mountaintop, you meditate, and you elevate yourself up to God, and that's what you do. And there actually is not a thought of bringing that back down into the earth. But when you are a Jew, the obligation is to take whatever spiritual gleanings you have and whatever spiritual growth and leaps and purifications, and to bring it down into physicality, and to elevate the physical, to elevate every element of your physicality, so that the material doesn't become you, but it becomes filled with the service of God, with godliness. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we're not purifying our godly soul. Our godly soul is purified. We're purifying the materiality of the world, and we're doing this by making all of it outside ourselves. Like Yaakov says, it's a stranger to me. It's not me. But we still take the physicality, and we still need to use it and refine it. And it says that no matter what the duration of a person's life, hopefully 120 years and then renegotiating, that the physical is not in conflict with the spiritual. Because if we have this attitude, we can have all these things, we can have prosperity, but it doesn't define us. And we can have it only to use in the service of God, to release the sparks that are in the physicality. And it says that when we prepare ourselves for the redemption, we affect the whole world. And it says one good deed can tip the scales of the world. One good deed that we do can change the whole essence of the world. And I remember it's very interesting. I'm in a writing workshop, which is really quite extraordinary. And one of the women in the workshop, now that everything is on Zoom and it's not in person, there are 6 people in the workshop. I can tell you like a story for hours about each one it's just fascinating. But one of the women said that her last name was Westerbeck. And I had to say, are you from Westerbeck Ranch? And because she lives in Northern California. So Westerbeck Ranch was a retreat center in Northern California that my husband and I and the Langer family, Chabad of San Francisco, Chabad of Berkeley, we used to run retreats there all the time. And I can go through a list of people, maybe some of them are on this Facebook tonight, whose lives were changed at Westerbeck Ranch during those times that we ran those retreats. Like what are the chances that I meet the people that were running that retreat in a class, and it was a beautiful place, and beauty can be used for transformation. Beauty can be used in the physical sense of affecting the whole world, to beautify the world and to release the sparks of godliness and holiness that are in the world. And it says that when Israel will do tshuva, meaning the people of Israel, and live in a godly way, in a holy way, then the whole world has an ability to be redeemed. And that not only personally, but also generally for the whole world. So, there was actually a beautiful piece of Chassidus that I actually wanted to teach, and I'm going to skip. It's so sad that I'm going to skip it, but I I want to talk about Yotes Kislev. And so we're going to just skip it. And maybe it'll be added to my list of things that we will come back to. Maybe I'll start with it next week. You know what? I'm going to do that. Okay? I'm actually going to start with it next week. It's about purifying the world, and it's connected to the donkey of Yaakov. And okay. So I'd like to just speak about, since we're not going to have class till next Wednesday, which will be the day before Hanukkah, and I probably will have to not teach that and just go right into Hanukkah because there's so much about Hanukkah. I want to talk about a Hasidic holiday coming up this weekend called Yotes Kislev. It's the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, it's called. And I just want to give a little background first. So, I don't know, I'm not making an assumption, but I have talked in all my classes about the Lubavitch Rebbe's and the dynasty of the Rebbe. So I'm just going to go through it in a minute. So the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. He revealed Chassidus in the world at a time when there was a lot of Jewish suffering. It says that there were a lot of pogroms at the time. There was a lot of, there was tremendous poverty. It was a time of sadness. It was the time of spirits being down. And he came to inspire a fainting generation. And it says his name is Yisrael. So it says that when a person is in a state of faint, when a person is in a state of fainting, you say their name in their ear, their Hebrew name, and it revives the soul. And his name is Yisrael. And Yisrael is what the Jewish people are called. So the Baal Shem Tov revealed Chassidus in the world. And what is Chassidus? Chassidus is what we call the panemius of Torah. It's the deep inner meaning, the deep inner soul of Torah, because everything has a body and a soul. So we do need the body of the Torah. The body of the Torah are the laws, the written Torah, the narratives. We're talking about who owns what, the commandments, how you're supposed to perform them, what you're actually doing in a physical way in the world. And it says that the body has eyes, the body can smell, the body can grasp, but the soul, it comes from the panemius. The soul comes from the inner part of the body, of the being, and that relates to the panemius of Torah, the inner teachings of Torah. It's like if you have a dish, let's say you have a tasty dish, and you want to bring out the taste more, then you have to salt it, or use spices, or use something that will bring out the flavor. And that's what Chassidus does. It brings out the deep flavor. I'm just looking for a certain teaching. Okay, here it is. One second. Okay, so that's what it does. It brings out that depth. It brings out that depth inside it. So we have the Baal Shem Tov, who brought these teachings of Chassidus into the world. Then we have, after the Baal Shem Tov, we have the Maggid of Mezrich, who is the student of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Maggid of Mezrich had 10 students, and among them was the Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman, who is the Rebbe of Lubavitch. And he was the youngest, but he then became the head of this Hasidic brotherhood after the Maggid left this world. So, and what did he do? It says he took this world, which is called Olam for world. And what is Olam? It comes from the root Helam, which means concealment. So there was a concealment, and he revealed what was concealed in the world. And it says that he spread these teachings, which are called the well springs of Chassidus, out into the world. So that's kind of the background of the history of who these people were. So I want to talk about exactly why this is called a holiday. It's going to start on Friday night, is the 19th of Kislev. So it says the 19th of Kislev commemorates the nullification of a capital sentence against the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe is the founder of the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement, and today there are 4,000 or 5,000 Chabad centers all over the world, and many, many different places, including Dubai. Yeah, and just the Congo, any place you can name it. And at the time that it was founded by the Alter Rebbe, it was a movement that was new, and it was a movement that many people in the Jewish world felt was going to destroy Jewish souls, to just destroy the lives of Jewish people. And so a group of people reported to the Russian government that the Alter Rebbe was engaged in treason. And how did they come to prove that he was engaged in treason? That they said that he was collecting money, which was true. He was sending that money to Eretz Israel, which was true. And that was a treasonous act. Why? Because at that time, the Ottoman Empire controlled Israel, Eretz Israel, and Russia was at war with the Ottoman Empire. And the group of people that went and told on the Rebbe convinced the Russian government that he wasn't helping Jews in Eretz Israel, that he was really helping to support the Turkish Empire, and they were the enemies of Russia. And so he was arrested. And the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned in the year 1798. And there are many, many stories about how he was taken and where he was taken and why he was taken. And they're really quite heartbreaking, because almost every single Rebbe, except the Rebbe that was our current Rebbe, was imprisoned in Russian prison camps, and many of them were tortured. And many of them, there's a book about the previous Rebbe called A Prince in Prison, and it's a book that I actually cannot read. I started to read a few pages, and he remembers every single detail, and it's just horrifying. It's really just horrifying, the treatment of Jews for teaching Judaism, for teaching Jewish practice. And for the Alter Rebbe, it was like releasing souls from being imprisoned in a way that they couldn't relate. That's what the Baal Shem Tov, the gift of the Baal Shem Tov, was to release these teachings that just enlivened and spoke to the souls of this generation. It wasn't new. The Chassidus was given at the time that Moshe received all the Torah teachings. But it wasn't revealed to the general public in a way until the Baal Shem Tov started in the world, and then the Maggid, and then it was disseminated by the Alter Rebbe. So this was a very heavy sentence. He was put in jail, and for treason, you're sentenced to death. So the Alter Rebbe was accused of spreading Hasidism throughout Russia, starting this movement, and the Tsar thought it was a threat to his personal authority. And it says, but how could this have happened? I mean, he was a giant. He was a giant in the Torah world. And it said it was a reflection of events that were taking place in the spiritual realm. And it says when the Alter Rebbe was in prison, he was visited, okay, quote unquote, visited, but he was, by the Baal Shem Tov, who had left this world, who is the founder, and by the Maggid of Mezrich, also from the other world. The Maggid of Mezrich, whose yahrzeit is also on Yotes Kislev. And he asked them why he had been arrested. And they explained that his manner of teaching Chassidus, meaning making it so public and so open, aroused what was called a kisrug, meaning an offense, a punishment from the higher worlds, and the legitimacy of him having dispensed this Chassidus was challenged in the heavenly court. And one of the things that inspired the people that turned against the Alter Rebbe, which were other Jews, sad to say, was that they found there was a piece of Torah that was lying in the road, because everything was handwritten in those days. And it was lying in the street, and a wagon wheel rolled over it. And they said, this is horrible that you could dispense these teachings and treat them in such a way that it wasn't meant to be for everybody. And he understood that in order to revive the souls of the Jewish nation, it had to go out to everybody. So it says that before his imprisonment, he had been teaching openly to the masses. And it says but the objection was raised in the higher worlds, that the world was not yet refined enough to receive these teachings, these spiritual truths. And this resulted in the arrest of the Alter Rebbe. And when he heard this explanation, he asked, should he be released? Should he continue to teach? He asked this to the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. And they explained that if he would be released, it would be a sign of divine acceptance of his actions, and he should continue with greater intensity and greater power and greater strength. And what happened was that the Russian government dropped the charges against the Alter Rebbe, and he was released on Yotes Kislev. But before he was released, if anybody is interested, there's so many things written, or you could go on Chabad.org and see what stringencies the Hasidim took upon themselves in order to storm the gates and storm the heavens and try to release the Rebbe, not only in contributing money and funds, but in just what they did, fasting and everything they took upon themselves to change this decree upon the Rebbe. Like what one would do and more for a parent, for somebody who had given them life. And it says that Yotes Kislev was a turning point in the Alter Rebbe's approach to teaching. And it says after his release, he began to deliver longer discourses and to present Hasidic thought in an intellectual framework rather than as brief articles of faith. And the Rebbe named his approach Chabad. That's why Chabad, if you ever wanted to know why Chabad is called Chabad, it's an acronym for the Hebrew words wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Chachma is wisdom, Bina is understanding, and Das is knowledge, therefore Chabad. And it highlighted the intellect as a medium for connecting with God. And we'll go into that in a minute. So it says that the Baal Shem Tov taught that God desires the heart. And he talked about simple faith and commitment of the common person. That was the gift of the Baal Shem Tov. He aroused that in people. And he explained that the heart, that arousing the heart and serving God with this deep love would establish a deeper and more powerful bond with God than a scholarly effort. Because up until that time, the people that were most looked up to and prolific in their learning of Torah were the scholars. And the simple people were kind of just left off to the side. And he roused the simple people to find their place. And it says that the Alter Rebbe changed course in a certain sense, and he emphasized the mind. And it says that he used the heart in service of the intellect, and the intellect in service of the heart. It was circular. So it says that there is a contradiction between the head and heart. So how can the spiritual emotions that were encouraged by the Baal Shem Tov be reconciled with the intellectual approach of Chabad? That is the question on the table. And it says, to answer this, we have to look at the potential that we have within our souls. So it says certain of our potentials, like we talked about when we were talking about Yaakov and distancing his intellect and emotions, or Esav, looking at him with a distance of intellect and emotions, that these things are limited. However, the essence of the soul is above, transcends all these things, and transcends any limit there is. Because why? Because it says that the soul is mamish, an actual part of God. Mamish means actual, not like a part of God, not connected to a part of God, but it is actually a part of God. And just like we cannot limit or define God in any way, neither can our souls. So the soul cannot be reduced to being defined or identified with any human quality. And it says that this potential cannot be defined as transcending all our other potentials, because then we would be limiting, again, the soul's power. The soul has to be capable of pervading the entire realm of consciousness, the entire realm of human potential. And it reveals its unlimited power within this limited context. So we can understand now, kind of, because we have to give it a lot of thought. You have to chew over these concepts. It's not like, you can read it and say, oh yeah, that's great. These things you use your mind to dissect, to take apart, to chew on, to understand. You use that wisdom and you bring it to your understanding. It's not a brief process. It says that there was a time in the world it was a double darkness, and for double darkness you need a stronger light. And we learn that we have to open our minds to new ideas. And what was the new idea? Is that God spoke and the world came into being. And the Chabad of Chassidus, the Chassidus Chabad, awakens this feeling in the heart, and we have to train the heart to understand, to think these things over, that this Chassidus awakens the heart from thinking about it, from feeling it, from mulling it over, taking it apart. And then it trains the heart to feel the right things. So that God spoke and the world came into being means I open my mind to this, that we serve God with the mind and with the heart. So Chabad Chassidus is using the intellect to stimulate the heart. And the warmth of the heart will again inspire the mind and inspire the intellect. And it will take you deeper and deeper and deeper. And without this, we could think that what we feel is the most important thing in the world. So that, how do you feel about that? And I feel this way. I feel that way. I feel, Robin Hood was okay. He could steal from the rich to feed, whatever it is, but we use our mind to take things apart and to understand. And that was Chabad Chassidus, is using the intellect. And it says that the Baal Shem Tov stirred the essence of the Jewish soul, and he opened up to us to the possibility that we can go way beyond where our conscious power takes us. And it says, once this is revealed, this transcendent essence of the soul needs to be internalized and integrated. So we bring it back, we mull it over, we use our wisdom, we use our understanding, we use our knowledge, we use our heart. It's a process. And this process begins with our intellect, with our intellectual faculties. And this we accomplish through the Alter Rebbe's teachings. This is what he taught, and this was what was successfully released into the world on Yutes Kislev. And it says that the focus of Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, on intellectual endeavor does not limit Chassidus to the realm of human thought. It says it shows how this study and practice of Chassidus can transform the nature of our thoughts and expand our intellectual potential to the point where it can relate to essential godliness. We can actually reflect on it, and we can relate to it, and we can know that God spoke and the world came into being. And the intellect allows people to grow and to communicate. And it says by developing an intellectual framework for Hasidic thought, the Alter Rebbe made it possible for the Baal Shem Tov's teachings to permeate the full scope of our personalities, and that we can pass it on, we can share it with other people. This quality of Ahavas Yisrael is very important. I just want to read to you from today's Hayom Yom, which I underlined. Hold on. Hayom Yom is a piece of Torah that's pulled from the Frierdiker Previous Rebbe's writings, and it's a piece of Torah for every day. And it's right here in my handy dandy Hayino. And it says here about loving a fellow Jew. It says, Ahavas Yisrael, which is a quality that the Alter Rebbe pushed and pushed and pushed. This is what he cared about. This is why there are so many Chabad centers all over the world open with open doors. Open doors, like when 24/7, open to other Jews. So Ahavas Yisrael does not mean loving another Jew because she or he is intelligent, pleasant, or appealing, nor because of shared interests, concerns, or even family ties. It stems from the fact that all Jews share the same godly essence. When one understands this, it matters little whether or not one knows the other person. One loves them because of the very fact that they are a fellow Jew. And it says that some people mistakenly view the intellectual approach to Chabad as an end in itself, but we know that it's only a stepping stone to enable a person to direct their heart to a deeper spiritual purpose. I remember one of the things, growing up, I certainly was not connected really to my Jewish self so much. And I remember always being amazed that when anything happened in Israel, and I wasn't that connected to Israel, that my family, my community, wherever I was, people were connected. They were suffering. If a Jew was killed in Israel, everybody was like heartbroken. You know, when people were collecting money for Israel, there was not a question that you would give. I read the autobiography of Golda Meir when the lockdown first started. It was a very big, fat book. And when she came to America after the War of Independence, during the War of Independence, to raise money for arms, I I could be mistaken, but I believe at that time she raised close to $50 million. I mean, I don't think you could raise $50 million today. Or maybe you could, I don't know. I'm not an Israeli fundraiser, but every single people gave everything they had. That was that was the level of Ahavas Yisrael. And this is one of the main teachings of the Alter Rebbe and of Chabad Chassidus, was this quality of Ahavas Yisrael, because we all are connected on a soul level. So it says that in light of all this, we can understand the choice of oil as a metaphor for Chassidus. Oil has two distinctive qualities. It does not mix with other liquid, and it can penetrate all matter. And the same is true of the teachings of Chabad Hasidism. It reveals the essence of our souls, which is the highest of our potentials. The Alter Rebbe's contribution enables this potential to influence and affect the functioning of every aspect of our life. So it says that why did God create the world? Because he desired a dwelling in this lower world. Because if a person is at home, it's where they reveal their true self. And God's desire for a dwelling as the purpose of his creation, that he wants his essence to be revealed, and he wants his essence to be revealed here in the physical world, in the lower worlds, in our physical world. And it says that God's essence will be revealed, and that revelation will pervade creation. And so I want to actually, I know it's late. Many of you have things to do, places to go, but I want to do end with a beautiful teaching. And it's one that relates to my friend Terry, who was, I don't know if she's still here, but I always think of her when I teach this piece of Torah. So it says that when the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, he was interrogated by a deputy minister who knew all the scriptures. Now, unfortunately, tragically, heartbreakingly, many of the secret police, which were called the NKVD at the time, were Jewish. And many of them had grandfathers that were Hasidim. And I believe it was with the Alter Rebbe when they were taking him to prison, and one of the interrogators who came to arrest him wanted to carry his tefillin because his grandfather had carried his tefillin. He said, your grandfather carried my tefillin to where I wanted to go. You can't, don't touch them. In other words, you're taking me to where I don't want to go. So they were knowledgeable. Some of them were knowledgeable. So one of the questions an official asked him concerned the plain sense of the text. And the eternal God called to the man, Adam, and said to him, where are you? Did not God know where Adam was, that he had to inquire, where are you? God says, where are you? Adam eats from the tree and hides, and God says, where are you? So the Rebbe tells him the text, as Rashi answered, that, he was like giving him a chance, of course he knew where he was, making him comfortable. And the official said, I am aware of Rashi's explanation. I would like to hear an explanation from the rabbi, from you. What do you have to say this means? And the Rebbe replied, when a person is, for example, X years old, and here he mentioned the exact age of the interrogator, the Almighty asks him, where are you? Are you aware of why you were created on earth? Are you aware of what you are expected to do and how much you have done? The Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe tells this story, and he concluded it by saying that the Alter Rebbe's reply to the official saved the Alter Rebbe himself from what's called klos hanefesh, from the expiration of his soul. Because the Alter Rebbe, when he sat in prison and he had the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrich come visit him, he understood that he was being imprisoned and he was suffering this level of martyrdom for the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Like this was his Rebbe, and he was going all the way and saying, this is the truth, and I'm going to stand up for the truth. And that bliss of having that connection with the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid brought him to the state of almost his soul leaving his body, just like the souls of Nadav and Avihu, whose souls expired in this tremendous love of God. But when he asked this question to this official, that God asks of everyone, where are you? Have you accomplished your mission? This impressed upon him so much that he had to remain on earth as a soul in a body to complete the purpose for which his soul descended into this world. So this has to have an effect and is a teaching for every single one of us. And the teaching is we have to know that the question, where are you, is asked of us constantly. Everyone, where are you? Where are you in your life? And to one person it says, where are you, may be an admonition to withdraw from this expiration of the soul, to withdraw from this ecstasy of reaching God, of when his sons drew near to God and died. It says you can't do that. That's not okay. They should have come back to the world. Their mission was to be souls and bodies in this world. And it says that we're all obligated to make this world in our own little space a dwelling place for God's presence. To another person, that call of where are you may be an admonition not to indulge in the passions of the world and worldly pleasures, because this will take a person very far away from God. Another person, where are you, needs to turn to Torah and study and doing mitzvahs. And asking the question gives each of us the strength to perform this particular service and to create the dignity for which a person was created, and to do it with joy and gladness of the heart. And it's very interesting because the person in the beginning that I said I'm direct, that whenever I teach this, I think of this particular person, is that I was at a baby shower for her, and she was having her second baby. And the journey that this person had been on was very, very long, very, very challenging in terms of family and practice of Judaism, and many, many details that are for long for bringing when my glass is full of wine so we can say l'chaim. But the short of the story is I taught this because it was Yud-Tes Kislev, the day of her baby shower that her mother made her at her house. The first time the second time she made something that was kosher. And I did this teaching of where are you? And she stood up and she said, I want to answer where I am in my life. And she said, and the word dignity stirred me to say this, dignity for which she was created. She said, when I had my first baby, she said, I would just, take off all my clothes and show everybody my stomach. And it was just the most, I was just the hippest, coolest person in the world. And that's what I did. But she said, but with this baby, she said, I respect my dignity. And I respect that I'm a holy Jewish woman. And I now light Shabbos candles. And I eat kosher food. And I am going to raise my children. I have mezuzahs on my door. And it has brought me so much more joy than that public freedom that I thought I had. That's where I am today in my life. So this question is being asked to all of us, and all of us really have to think about it, and all of us have to mull it over. And that this is coming up, this Friday night is Yud Tes Kislev. And this call of where are you is being asked to all of us. And I think that it's a time for deep reflection, and it's a time to really think, how do we want to recommit ourselves in our lives? It's also the time that that the Alter Rebbe revealed the mysteries, the secrets of the Torah, and he brought it all down into the realm of the intellect, where we can learn with our Chachma, our Bina, our Das, our divine soul. And it can have an influence on our physicality, on our bodies, on our homes, on our lives, on our communities. And there is, this time of year, Yud Tes Kislev, it was revealed that yes, there is permission to go deeper, to go more, to go to the essence. That's why the Alter Rebbe was released. And we have to try to grasp these ideas. We have to think about them. We have to talk about them. There is so much available today. There is a WhatsApp, and I'm not so, as you know that my light went out, I'm not so technically advanced, but there is a WhatsApp of Tanya. It's called GPS for the Soul. It's by Nadav Cohn, and if anybody emails me, I will get you hooked up for it. And it's 3 minutes of Tanya a day. I was going to look it up on my phone, but I'm talking into my phone. It's like the piece of Tanya for every day, starting Yud Tes Kislev begins the beginning of the year. All the volumes of Tanya start again, and you can listen, and it's 3 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes a day. And you could learn the book that the Rebbe is most famous for. I mean, among many, many books, but so many people learn Tanya today. And that could be an answer to where are you? We're being asked on high what we have accomplished in the purpose of the creation, how we were able to transform this lowly material world into a dwelling place for the divine presence, and how we're going to do it and how we're going to go forward. And it says that we're able to learn the concealed parts of the Torah. And I can only say that the concealed parts of the Torah are what feed my soul. You know, when I first started to study Chassidus, and I walked into a women's yeshiva in Minnesota after I had studied in Jerusalem many years, and I studied wonderful Torah without Chassidus, wonderful Torah. I studied in diaspora yeshiva. It was inspiring. It was engaging. It was intellectually stimulating. But Chassidus was different for me, and it really spoke on the deepest level of my soul, and it really gave me everything that I had been searching for, and went all around the world to learn and integrated it back into me. And I felt like the first day I sat in a class and I learned Tanya, I felt like my glasses, which are always dirty, if somebody knows how to clean glasses well, but I felt like my glasses had been cleaned and like I could see totally clearly. And so I want to give everybody a blessing for Yud Tes Kislev, which is going to be Friday night and Saturday. Saturday night, there's going to be a wonderful Farbrengen on the yeshiva.net with Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, starting after Shabbos, our time, in Los Angeles. If you're in New York, it starts at 7:30. If you're in Los Angeles, Shabbos is over at 5:30. But, you know, to connect to something like that, it will add to your day. It will add to your night. It will be inspiring to keep the energy of Yud-Tes Kislev going, and to ask yourself, where are you? You know, where are you in your spiritual life? Where are you in the direction that you want to go in? And that we should draw on strength from each other. So l'chaim to everybody. And next week, I have millions of other things I prepared, but I think 2 hours is enough. And next week, we're going to prepare for Hanukkah, because it's going to be, the class Wednesday night is going to be the night before Hanukkah. So I will see everybody next week. Thank you so much for coming to the class. And we say what we say for Yud-Tes Kislev is we say good Yontiv, good Yontiv, good Yontiv.